can't give you justice. This jury has given you what we as humans, the best we as humans can do to give you justice. Justice would be if I could reverse all of this, and I can't.
The jury has returned as its recommendation as to the defendant, Mario McNeil, that he be sentenced to death.
The time is 43 months. Has not healed or diminished his pain. I think about those last seconds when you was the last thing my daughter and I look at.
This is 5-year-old Shania Davis. Her mother sold her for $200 to a monster. What he did to her is simply shocking, and her mother's decision to send her off like this is just as chilling. Shania's story is tragic from beginning to end. Before we dive into the twists and turns of today's case, take a moment to support this channel by subscribing and hitting the notification bell. We bring you real crime stories and documentaries that unveil the dark truths behind true crime cases. It's hard to imagine a 5-year-old can go through this experience helpless, alone, and scared to death. Let's explore the horrific tale of Shania Davis and all the events that led up to her death. Shania Nicole Davis was born June 14, 2004 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. At first, she grew up with her loving parents, Bradley Lockhart and Antoinette Davis, and her brother Carl, who was 2 years older. But as her parents split up, the siblings went on to live with their dad. Antoinette had a rough patch financially, partially due to her substance addiction, and she didn't seem ready to raise 2 small kids. Nevertheless, she stayed close with little Shania. Shania loved both her parents very much. She was a happy-go-lucky girl who always smiled and loved pink and yellow. She was an energetic, outdoorsy type who loved riding her scooter and making friends wherever she went. Bradley loved Shania deeply, but he had a rough life too. He was married before Antoinette to a woman named Vicky Sue. When she was only 28, she was bound and shot along with her sister and a friend by a group of robbers who believed they had a huge amount of cash stashed in their house. The killers were caught and sentenced to life in prison. But imagine what that does to you as a person. Bradley had 3 children with Vicky Sue, but he didn't feel able to raise them, so they were raised by Vicky Sue's parents. Shania and Carl were the first children he raised on his own, but Shania wouldn't be in his care for long. In 2009, Shania was a kindergarten student at Morganton Road Elementary School. That year, Antoinette asked Brad to pass their daughter on to her. She was ready to be a mom. She now lived with her sister, Brenda Davis, and her boyfriend, Jeremy Smith, in their trailer home. It wasn't a luxurious situation. Brenda and Jeremy had kids themselves, and they would all sleep crammed in one room so that Antoinette could take the other bedroom. However, Brad said she had asked if she could be a mother, and I felt she was sincere in asking, so I figured I would give her a chance. So, in September 2009, Shania and Carl went on to live with Antoinette and her sister. But Brad's sister Carrie and his other friends all pointed to the same thing. Shania did not seem well under Antoinette's care. Brian even painted a more disturbing of Antoinette. Indeed, Brian is angry at Bradley for sending Shania to live with her mother in the first place. He had seen the bad signs when she would spend as little as a weekend with her mom. So why didn't he think of the risks? Call it reckless. Or wanting to see the good in people, Brad trusted his ex-wife. He wanted her to have the experience of being a mother and believed she had gotten her life on track. But just 2 months would pass, and Brad would regret his trusting nature for the rest of his life. It was November 10, 2009, just before sunrise, in their Sleepy Hollow trailer home. Brenda and Jeremy woke up to what sounded like someone trying to break into their home. The sound then stopped, and they went back to bed. But just a half hour later, Antoinette burst into their room, close to tears. "Have you seen Shania?" she asked. Brenda and Jeremy jumped out of bed. This was a serious situation. A 5-year-old girl was missing. Had she been taken by whoever had come into the house half an hour earlier? Or was that sound of Shania opening the door and leaving on her own? Brenda, Jeremy, and Antoinette dressed up to go outside and look around. But before they left, 7-year-old Carl added something crucial. He'd seen someone else in the home shortly beforehand. When Brenda heard this, she knew Shania had been kidnapped. So she urged her sister to call 911. Shockingly, Antoinette was hesitant. Why wouldn't a mother call the police first thing when her small child is missing? Antoinette wanted to ask around and look for herself before going through with the call, almost as if she believed she would bother the emergency services in vain. While Antoinette went outside and knocked on all the Sleepy Hollow trailer home doors, her sister and her boyfriend stayed indoors and spoke with Carl. When they asked him who he'd seen earlier that night, he said Mono. Mono was the nickname of a man called Mario McNeil. He used to date Brenda for a while, and according to some sources, he gave her the money necessary for the rent deposit to move into the trailer home. Whichever the case, Mario and Brenda had called it quits. And now, Mario lived with the mother of his 18-month-old baby, April Aturi. But Mario wasn't a family man, not by a long shot. He partook in CK, booze, and cheating on April with every woman in Fayetteville. A few days after Shania's disappearance, he would tell the police that on the night between November 9th and 10th, he texted all the females on his phone. He would tell them many more things, but for now, back to our story. Brenda and Jiroe asked Carl several times if he was sure he'd seen Mano in their home that night, and he said, yeah. So, Brenda called Mono, but he didn't answer. Then, Jiroe called April, and she said Mono was not with her. Something was amiss. Meanwhile, Antoinette returned from her walk through Sleepy Hollow. She said she knocked on everyone's door, but no one seemed to have seen Shania. Again, Brenda insisted that her sister call the police. While Antoinette promised to do so, Brenda and Jiroe went outside, only to notice there were feces on the railings. Okay, ma'am, how can I help you? I woke up this morning and my daughter was not in the house. I don't know if she walked out. I don't know what's going on, but she's not here. How old is your daughter? She's 5. 5? And your door was not unlocked? That's what you're telling me? No, it was not unlocked, but I'm telling you she knows how to unlock it, hoping that she didn't unlock it and walk out. This was happening at 6:52 a.m. By now, Mono was long gone with Shania. Shortly after 6 a.m. that morning, Mono checked into the Comfort Inn Suites in Sanford, an hour north of Fayetteville. He used his own name and checked in on his own. However, he mentioned to the desk clerk that he was traveling with his daughter to take her up to her mom. After checking in at 7:16 a.m., Mario returned to his car in the back of the parking lot. Then, he returned to his hotel room carrying a girl covered in a blanket. After leaving Shania in his room, Mono returned downstairs and went to the breakfast room, where he got a banana, a muffin, and some juice. At this point, there was an Amber Alert issued for Shania. Police and search dogs were scouring Fayetteville, and people all over North Carolina were on the lookout. Such was Jacqueline Lee, the desk clerk Mano had spoken to. When he saw him walking into the hotel with Shania, she thought she resembled the kid in the Amber Alert. Her shift was ending, though, so when her colleague came in, she told her to keep an eye on Mano and the girl. Back in Sleepy Hollow, detectives were interviewing Shania's family one by one. Officer Elizabeth Culver was the first to knock on the trailer home's door where Antoinette, Brenda, Joy, and the kids were. She also observed the nasty substance on the railings, but Antoinette had poured hot water on them in an attempt to clean them. The police also found a comforting blanket in a trash nearby. Joy said the blanket had been in the living room of their trailer recently. The blanket also had feces on it. When the police interviewed the family, they noticed they were all agitated in different ways. 7-year-old Carl wouldn't answer a question without looking at his aunt for approval first. He said he remembered his little sister coming to bed on November 9th, but he didn't remember her leaving the bedroom. However, he'd seen Mano inside the trailer park. But when the officers wanted to corroborate this story with Antoinette and Brenda, they hit a dead end. They were both looking at their phones and texting, almost ignoring the cops in the room. So, Elizabeth Culver decided to bring them to the police station for an official interview. As Antoinette and Brenda were being driven down, Elizabeth and her partner Daniel looked at the CCTV footage around their trailer home. But it was the CCTV footage at the Comfort Inn Hotel that would reveal the most. At 7:34 a.m., Mano left room 201, carrying Shania on his shoulder as he went into the elevator. He was still holding her this way as he left the hotel and walked down the sidewalk. When he exited the hotel, Matthew Argyle, the maintenance worker, noticed him and the girl, who seemed to be in a deep sleep. He said, "Hello?" trying to get Mano's attention, but he just looked back at Matthew and said nothing. Matthew thought Mano was creepy, so he followed him subtly to the parking lot. Mono put Shania in the rear right passenger side of his car. Then he got into the driver's seat and lit up a cigarette. After he finished his cigarette, Mono drove to the front entrance of the hotel, where he entered a room. He approached the new desk clerk, Regina, and asked her for a security deposit. He said he was going to drive her daughter to her mom in Virginia. As she told Jacqueline earlier, Regina handed him a receipt, and off he went. Shortly after, a housekeeper came down to the reception to hand Regina something. She just cleaned room 201, and she found two small, clear, open plastic packets with white powder residue inside, possibly eggs. When Regina saw the Amber Alert too, she called the police. Around 8 a.m., Mono was driving down a highway when he texted Brenda, "Hey." It was in reply to her own, "Hey," some hours ago when they were trying to get a hold of him. But by now, Brenda was being interrogated at the police station, and Mono's phone was being tracked. So Brenda wrote back to Mono, but their conversation was supervised. "Brenda, you've been to my house, Mano?" "No." "Why?" "Brenda? Are you lying, Mano?" "No." "Can I come through, Brenda?" "Hell no." "Mano, damn. It's like that him there." "Brenda, don't text me no emo, Mono." "Sure, whatever." "Who your baby dad called my baby my asking for me." "What the hell is going on?" "It's funny. Mano was calling Brenda out for reaching out to April and asking about his whereabouts." "Well, it's not really funny, because he had Shania's dead body in his car." When the police made their way to the Comfort Inn after Regina called the Amber Alert hotline, room 201 had been partially cleaned. The trash had been taken out and the towels had been removed, but the bedding had not been changed yet. Other detectives analyzed the hotel's CCTV footage and concluded Mono was with Shania. FBI agent Frank Brostrom was in charge of analyzing Mono's phone records. In the late afternoon of November 10th, Frank arrived at Skid Row, Sleepy Hollow together with the local police. By the end of the day, they had tracked Mono and Shania to the Highway 87 area between Spring Lake and Sanford. Also, by the end of the day, Brenda had finally told the cops Carl had seen Mono at the trailer house the night before. Brenda also said she saw Mono. "We saw Uno trying to talk to Antoinette shortly before the incident." Antoinette's response to the police, "I don't have so to say to you. I just want to know where my mother effing baby's at." On November 12th, Uno was found and arrested. His car was taken in as evidence and thoroughly analyzed by a forensics team. Shania had been missing for over 2 days now, but detectives were still hopeful she was alive. Uno was interviewed, but told he was free to go if he wanted to. He wasn't cuffed, and his phone wasn't taken away. In fact, he was allowed to use it during interview breaks. It was during this interview that he said he was the cheating type. This is how he justified that he was out on the streets on the night between November 9th and November 10th. However, he denied visiting Brenda's trailer home that night and denied knowing who Shania was. "Excuse me?" He dated Brenda. He was at her home several times. He knew Antoinette's kids all too well. He denied knowing Shania, taking her, driving her, and even visiting the Comfort Inn hotel. When the cops showed him a photo of Shania, the hotel, he still denied it. When they showed him the hotel records of a Mario McNeil checking in on the morning of November 10th, Mono said, maybe he'd lost his ID and someone else checked in with it. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, give this video a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on the events unfolding. Also, remember to share this video with someone who needs to stay informed about the dangers lurking online and offline. However, 54 minutes later, he admitted he was there with Shania. That night, he said, he received a text message from Brenda's phone to come to Sleepy Hollow and pick Shania up on the porch. He did as he was told, then drove her to the hotel, where he took white powder. Then, Mano said he got a call from an unknown person, instructing him to take Shania to a dry cleaning establishment at the corner of Country Club Drive and Ramsey Street. He said he delivered Shania to a group of people driving a gray Nissan Maxima. Then, Mano said he was waiting for a call to come and kill her. FBI agent, Frank Brostrom, asked him to expand on that, but he would not. But Brenda hadn't texted him yet to pick Shania up, and no unknown people had messaged or called him either. At the end of the interview, Mono was arrested and charged with the murder of Shania Davis. When it came to Antoinette, the interviews were filled with even more lies. First, She blamed her exes, her friends, and all those around her for everything that had gone wrong in her life. She was distracted and tried to distract the police officers from the actual question. What happened to Shania? Then she went quiet. As the cops confronted her with more and more evidence, she kept saying, "I don't have to say to you," as if they knew where Shania was, but didn't want to tell her it was the other way around. Only she could shed some light. But these detectives were well-versed in homicide investigations, so they knew when and where to apply pressure and how to get Antoinette to confess. Finally, she revealed her daughter had never been kidnapped. She beat her out to Mono for a meek $200. She said, "I gave her to him to cover $200. He was only supposed to have sex." Initial reports claimed that Antoinette owed Mono money for drugs through Cumberland County District Attorney Bill West later stated that this was not true. He said Mono had lent $200. Antoinette $200 to buy food and pay for a hotel room when she and her children found themselves homeless. In either case, Antoinette didn't have the money to pay Mono back. The intoxicated man told her he either wanted money or sex. And that's when Antoinette offered him Shania. She was freaking out. 5 years old. Antoinette claimed that she tried to stop Mono from taking her daughter that night, but Billy West didn't believe her. Remember the feces found on the blanket and on the railings? According to him, this is proof Shania was hurt at her home. I don't even know what to say about this, you guys. It is sickening that anyone would do this to a small child, but to think a mother could sell off her daughter this way, knowing what would happen, is unspeakable. He was only supposed to have sex, as if that would have been a fair debt settlement. How would have Shania lived with this experience, knowing her mother let her be violated to get out of paying $200? Antoinette Davis was charged with human trafficking, conspiracy, kidnapping, sexual servitude, taking indecent liberties with a minor, and second-degree murder. On November 15th, one of the investigators handling this case called Alan Rogers, Mono's attorney. The police had received some vague tips about finding Shania's body from Rogers. But this was a sort of telephone game. As Mono's attorney, Rogers wasn't supposed to help the police convict his client. So he gave the DA some tips, and the DA told the police about this. Now the investigator wanted Rogers to speak up. Shania's body had to be found. After multiple back-and-forth phone calls, Rogers pointed the police to the spot in the woods they should be looking at. A big search team scoured the area for 2 days straight. At around 1 p.m. on November 16th, a week after Shania's disappearance, her body was found under a log by an officer and his search dog. Found her? Right here. All right. All cold. Call welcome. We got a tip. Somebody in the parking lot said that they had heard on the news or something that the guy admitted to killing the young child and dumping her where there were deer carcasses and trash. She was simply dumped in a shuttered area near the intersection of Highway 87 and Walker Road. Mono hadn't even gone through the trouble of digging a hole. She was partially naked, and around her were indeed deer carcasses. I don't even know. I'm a little overwhelmed right now, so it's a lot. I'm I'm glad we were able to help. Mario McNeil was charged with first-degree murder. His reaction? According to the Fateful Observer, McNeil says his lawyer should not have told police where to find the girl, saying it hurt his case. Mono showed no remorse and said no apology for doing the absolute worst to Shania. He loved being the center of attention. He continued to smirk and grimace at the cameras whenever they would film him in court. The Fayetteville police also found explicit images of a young girl on Mono's phone. He was the absolute worst. Yet, he fought tooth and nail to get a light punishment. He filed pretrial motions to avoid the prosecution from seeking the death penalty. He used the North Carolina Racial Justice Act. Yeah, right. Like that has anything to do with raping and killing a child. He recanted all statements made to officers and faked agreements between him and the prosecution, but none of his motions were accepted. His trial was truly chilling for all those who knew and loved Shania. These poor people had to listen to accounts of gruesome and murder. When Mono was done with Shania, he simply spooked her and then carried her limp body through the hotel as if she was simply asleep. The calm way he presented her as his daughter to the desks and clerks, and the way he simply ignored the maintenance man as he carried a child's body inches away from him, is hard to fathom. But imagine you're Shania's dad listening to all this.
I can never get Shania back. You have taken that from me. The time is 43 months. has not healed or diminished this pain. I think about those last seconds, and you was the last thing my daughter got to look at. Laughing and joking like this is a joke. Shania wasn't a joke, but her legacy is going to live on. You didn't win. I could be angry and hateful towards you. It's not going to fix this problem. You didn't win. Shania won because she's still going to be speaking out, protecting people against people like you. Other little kids.
Kids exactly Brad Shania's family would go on to raise awareness around her case and try to encourage other families to protect their children from kidnapping and neglected parents. Mario McNeil was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping SA of a young child, and a dozen other charges. The verdict was simple. The jury has returned as its recommendation as to the defendant Mario McNeil that he be sentenced to death. And the judge, well, he delivered one of the most heartfelt conclusions I've ever heard.
You did not have to kill that child. Take him out of here now. I apologize for referring to Shania as the victim, for talking about Shania's body. I apologize for you having to go through any of this.
Indeed, he didn't waste too much time speaking to Mono. There was nothing he could do to change him. He was evil, plain, and simple. Instead, he addressed Brad and the rest of the family, knowing they needed all the comfort and closure they could get.
I can't give you justice. This jury has given you what we as humans, the best we as humans can do to give you justice. Justice would be if I could reverse all of this, and I can't. I said a prayer for you every night of this trial, and I will continue to do.
There was one last chapter left to close this case. At the time of the arrest, Antoinette was pregnant. Yep, you heard that right. When she gave birth to the child, it was taken from her and put into foster care. She faced a long list of charges but entered Alfred pleas, not pleading guilty but admitting that the state had adequate evidence to convict her. To second-degree murder, human trafficking, conspiracy, and kidnapping, sexual offense, sexual servitude, and taking indecent liberties with a minor. At the end of her sentencing, she said,
I did the best I could with my children. I never said I was a perfect mother, but I was a good mother. I did what I had to provide for them. I did what I had to make sure they was all right, because I didn't have any help from anybody.
You sold your 5-year-old daughter as a sex slave. No, you were not a good mother, Antoinette. And yes, you did have help from a lot of people, and they were all better caretakers than you. Judge Jim Ammons told her, "You
saved your daughter's life, and you did not. You had the time, the opportunity, and the means to save Shania's life, and you did not. You are not a good mother. This did not have to happen. Take her away, please."
Good mother is making a few mistakes, but good intentions. A good mother is caring for her child no matter what, and doing her best to provide care, attention, and nurture. Antoinette might be one of the worst mothers out there. In July 2011, she was sentenced to 17 years in prison. She will also have to register as a sex offender once she is released. But as Mano's judge said, there is little justice in convicting these two people. It's good they're off the streets, but imagine the pain Brad, little Carl, and the rest of Shania's family have to live with. Brad was seen crying and borderline collapsing at the court hearings and candlelit vigils for his daughter. But
Lord, I come to you with open arms, and it's hard. It's hard. It's hard, man. It's hard.
Bradley Lockhart could hardly speak, his legs shaking. He was held up by friends and by a crowd of hundreds around him.
Don't give up on me, and don't give up on Shania. She right there with you.
People flooded a shopping center parking lot on Murkison Road, lighting candles in remembrance of 5-year-old Shania Davis.
Just bless her and bless those who did not know no better.
he was laid to rest at Fayetteville Memorial Cemetery with the inscription, "God's angel called home," in a tragic twist. Shania's half-brother Chavez Lockhart died on May 25, 2017. He was 20 years old. and buried next to his little sister.
A family dealing with the unthinkable for a second time, the loss of a child.
8 years after the body of 5-year-old Shania Davis was found in Sanford, her older half-brother was shot and killed.
Chavez was killed at 9:30 p.m. at a different trailer park home. While inside his car, 2 teen boys were arrested for his murder. According to Sheriff Hubert, may have been involved in the murder motive. This is remember Chavez's mother, Vicky Sue, had also been killed, along with her sister, in a home robbery? It's hard to imagine how this family lives with this amount of tragedy. In an interview with Oprah, Brad was asked if he would ever speak to Antoinette again. He said the system takes its course. I try to keep my heart as pure as possible, and I'm sure that one day I will be able to sit down and talk with her and try to understand what was going through her mind. Brad seems very wise considering what he went through. He's hoping that Shania's awful death will help keep other children safe through awareness and togetherness. Indeed, let us hope that horrible cases like these do have a silver lining. Without it, all of the suffering is in vain. Thanks for watching, you guys. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you know of other similar stories? Let me know in the comments section. And before you leave, make sure you like and subscribe. See you next time and stay safe.